All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin our webinar. Again, we welcome you all. Kay tawas diushap, kay tawat ashap say hopa, wahene me huga yup shkayutse or shrat honosta. Good morning and welcome. It is with great pleasure and honor to be with you today for our Four Winds Diversified Project webinar titled Understanding and Capitalizing on the Buy Indian Act. My name is Russell F. Pedro, Senior Business Certification and Training Specialist for the Four Winds Diversified Project and CEO of Data Management of New Mexico. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we have over 130 registered participants here today, representing 26 states to include New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Texas, California, Illinois, Montana, Virginia, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Kansas, Alaska, Georgia, Oregon, Washington, Michigan, Nevada, New York, Florida, North Carolina, Utah, Wyoming, Minnesota, Kentucky, the Navajo Nation, and our neighbors and friends in Canada. Again, Gaitawash Jushab, Gaitawa Tabashab. We welcome you all, and we hope that you are healthy, happy, and well in your respective communities. The overall missions of our Four Winds Diversified Project webinars are to get you as the contractor ready and prepared to bid, market, and meet with federal procurement officers, as well as prepare you and your company for government contracting vehicles. It'll be nice if I had the presentation up. So excuse me for that. We hope that, again, everybody is joining us and everybody is well. So again, we welcome you all to our Four Winds Diversified Project webinar. As mentioned, we are going to be focusing on understanding and capitalizing on the Buy Indian Act. Before we move forward with our webinar, I would like to take care of a couple of housekeeping duties. At the bottom of our Zoom webinar platform, there is a question and answer dialog box. Please use this question and answer dialog box to ask questions. And at the end of our webinar presentation, we will read and answer each question presented to our panelists and team. Your feedback is very important to us, so please fill out the end of the webinar survey, which will be emailed to you after our event. Please silence your phones and thank you for your participation. Today, our Four Winds Diversified Project team would like to welcome and thank in advance Ms. Kay Bills, President of Strategic Native American Partnerships, LLC, for joining us today to share her in-depth knowledge and advice on the Buy Indian Act program. So thank you, Ms. Bills. So who is the Four Winds Diversified Project? Since September of 2019, we've operated in the Southwest region and nation and branded our center the Four Winds Diversified Project. This innovative project was conceptualized by Southwest Business Development Consultants and Data Management of New Mexico and is currently funded by the Minority Business Development Agency, U.S. Department of Commerce. We are currently in our first quarter of our third year and are located at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Four Wind Diversified Project provides the following resources and services. We are here to provide federal contracting strategies, training, and coaching, assessments and certification for federal set-aside programs such as the SBA's 8A, HUB Zone, Women-Owned, and Veteran-Owned certification programs. provide quarterly small business training, one-on-one meetings and consultant services, provide access to opportunities, access to capital, and access to resources and referrals. And the beautiful thing is that there is no cost for our core services. The Minority Business Development Agency was established in 1969 and is the only federal agency solely dedicated to the growth and global competitiveness of minority and Native American-owned small businesses. New Mexico was one of the first MBDA business centers to open its doors nearly 52 years ago, and today there are over 44 business and specialty centers throughout the nation, including Puerto Rico. Our Four Winds Diversified project is honored to be part of 13 American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian grantees, and as mentioned, honored to be part of a larger 44 nationwide MBDA business, specialty, and advanced manufacturing centers, whom some are present with us today. So welcome, MBDA family. We love your support. We currently serve over 150 clientele, of which 80% are Native American owned and operated. Our clients range from construction to IT, marketing and media, consultants, healthcare, real estate, renewable energy, hospitality, entertainment, waste management, insurance, engineers, architects, web developers, software developers, project management firms, nonprofits, and tribes. We have clients nationwide, ranging from, of course, New Mexico, Colorado, Texas, and as far as DC, Florida, North Dakota, Washington, and California. Over the last 2 decades, our Four Winds Diversified project team has built a powerful network with over 80 resource and strategic partners in New Mexico, the Southwest, and nation. We are currently working with our strategic partners to enhance our procurement capabilities and to offer unlimited access to contract opportunities on the federal, state, local, and tribal levels, including by Indian set-asides. This initiative is to better assist our clients in identifying contract opportunity matches and build their businesses to scale. Our project team also currently hosts quarterly webinar training to include the following. We did have a great webinar on the capability statements, manufacturing, construction in Indian country, preparing for virtual matchmaker part 1 and 2, access to capital part 1, and of course today, understanding and capitalizing on the Buy Indian Act. And as mentioned, all these webinars are geared towards our collaborative virtual matchmaking event to be hosted sometime in December. So please look out for that flyer and for those dates. Now for team introductions, first and foremost is Mr. Michael D. Peacock, CEO and President of Southwest Business Development Consultants, as well as Project Operator and Senior Business Strategic Consultant for the Four Winds Diversified Project. Mr. Peacock, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Russell, and welcome and good morning to all the 130 participants from all over the country. Very exciting today to be able to host this valuable webinar. And I'd like to thank Kay Bill, longtime friend and advocate of Native American small business, and also to acknowledge her as the former Native American liaison for the Minority Business Development Agency in DC. She possessed that position many, many years ago, and she still plans to work and come out of retirement. So I want to welcome her today and welcome everybody here. And what a great seminar. And thank you again. And I'll turn it back over to Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Peacock. Next, we have Ms. Darla Jones, who serves as our program manager for the Four Winds Diversified Project. Ms. Jones currently oversees our Four Winds project and is the point of contact for all business inquiries. At the end of this presentation, we will have all of our contact information. So Ms. Jones, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Russ. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Again, I'm Darla Jones, the project manager. Thank you to our participants for joining us today. And Ms. Kay Bills, thank you for participating. It's nice to see you again. And if there's any questions regarding our project, the Four Winds Diversified project, my contact is here in the chat, and I would be glad to answer any questions. And again, thank you guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Jones. As mentioned, my name is Russell Pedro. I'm currently the Senior Business Certification and Training Specialist and CEO of Data Management of New Mexico. I've been very fortunate to work with Native American and minority-owned small businesses, nonprofits, or Native youth, and tribal organizations over the last 17 years in New Mexico, the Southwest, and nation, through past affiliations with the MBDA Business Development Center Network, the American Indian Chamber of Commerce of New Mexico, and the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association. During that time, our team has had the honor to host over 10 minority and Native American economic summits, 5 meet and greets with our local national laboratories, 3 one-on-one buyer-seller procurement fairs, and 2 youth conferences, all focused around assisting our small businesses and tribal business communities. My personal motto is access to capital plus access to opportunities equals job creation and community and economic development. Now for some advice before we hit the meat of our presentation. As mentioned in previous webinars, it is crucial and very important that you update your SAM database information. Make sure to update all your pertinent information to include that your registration status is active, that all of your core data, including your addresses, phone number, fax numbers, emails, are also updated, including your web address, and to make sure that your SAM search authorization has a yes. This database is going to be crucial and determining many things, including the Buy Indian Act program. Also, make sure that you have your points of contact updated with the correct individual, including, of course, names, addresses, and phone numbers, as well as emails. Again, another important database is to make sure that you have your SBA ProNet profile updated, to make sure that your status is active. Of course, addresses, phone numbers, fax numbers, emails, and again, your contact person. Make sure that that person is the right individual to answer any questions. Of course, make sure you update your capabilities narrative, as well as your NAICS and keywords on a continual basis. This database is also used when procuring for the Buy Indian Act program. Of course, again, as I mentioned, statement of qualifications is like a business plan. It is a living, breathing document. To make sure you update your statement every time you have completed a new project or contract. Again, you will have different statements for different buyers, as well as different statements for different agencies and contractors. It'll change dependent on the targeted agency because each agency has their own mission and focus. So make sure you do your due diligence and make sure that your statements are updated monthly or every time you have a new contract. And without further ado, it is our great honor and privilege to welcome Ms. Kay Bills, President of Strategic Native American Partnerships, LLC, to our webinar. We will have a lot of great information. And again, this webinar will be available after our event. Ms. Bills, we welcome you to our Four Winds Diversified Project webinar. Ms. Bills.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm so pleased to get such a broad range of states that are tuning into this. And I'm going to start by saying thank you, Russell, for telling them, please keep your SBA ProNet statement up to date. That's the key to getting into the Buy Indian Act. Next. First of all, I'm going to disclaim, I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on Zoom or anywhere else. I'm making these comments today in my way of sharing what my adventure was in federal contracting, what I kind of learned along the way. There's a number of excellent attorneys that you can talk to that'll get down in the weeds on all the specifics. But thank you for this great privilege of speaking to you today, because I know how valuable your time is. And I will be available after this seminar. You'll have my contact information as well. Next. So let's start. The purpose of today is to learn about the history of the Buy Indian Act, to discuss the Buy Indian Act's new legislation that was enacted and signed into law in December of 2020, a call to action for Indian owners and tribal leaders and federal and state political leaders to speak about the enactment of that law that was passed in December of 2020 and is yet to be established. And of course, I'm going to share these slides with anyone, so feel free to capture them later. Thank you. Next. First, my history. Well, I left Oklahoma in Osage County, 1965. 1975, I moved to Alaska, and there I began to understand what the grim elastic statistics were. The Alaska Lands Claim Settlement Act was enacted just shortly before that, and many of the businesses that were stood up were in bankruptcy. It was a terrible time in Alaska, and the growth of the Alaskan businesses comes straight from federal contracting. So I opened a computer company in Wasilla, Alaska, in 1991. And in 1992, I received an 8A in telecommunications from the SBA, the 18th company in Alaska, the first telecom in the whole district, region 7 for SBA. But as time went by, things happened. I sold part of my company to a bankrupt ANC, but they were in bankruptcy, Chugach Alaska Corporation. You can't believe it today, but that's where they were. And they didn't know what to do with me, so they sent me out and I began to market and look for team members. I'm afraid it wasn't a very warm reception from the other tribes because they all had a fallback. They were all into gaming at that time. But they sent me to Washington, D.C., and I met a woman by the name of Myrna Munson, and she worked for the Indian Health Service. And in those days, you could just walk in to an office. It was not like it is today. And she gave me a copy, a mimeograph copy of the Buy Indian Act. Said, we should be doing this. We should be doing this. I then, in 2004, after I sold the rest of my company, I moved to Washington, D.C. as a professor of entrepreneurship at Howard University. And I got a small SBA contract to do some marketing. Then that's when I went into the Department of Commerce, and they said they needed an Indian. I didn't know what they were talking about, but a law had been adapted in 2000, and it was now 2005, and they had never opened that office. So they, for whatever reason, hired me to do that. And I became the first director of the Office of Native American Business Development, Tourism, Trade Promotion. That worked until about 2009, 5 years later. I returned to Oklahoma, Osage County is where I live now in Gray Horse. 24 years after learning about the Buy Indian Act, I'm finally excited to see it take roots. Next, please. First of all, it's the oldest of the Indian preference laws. It's been on the books since 1910. You have to remember a little bit about your history. In 1910, the allotment of the lands were happening. The federal government decided to make us farmers, ranchers, and someone threw in the idea of being a merchant. Well, what were we known for merchants? We were receiving rations from the government. We didn't have any idea how that happened. But the law was passed, and the BIA first implemented this program about 1965. The final rules were adopted by BIA in July of 2013, 103 years later. In 2015, the GAO published a study and recommendations on the Buy Indian Act. And there's a link here for you to look, and you should read that study. But to summarize it, it was clear that BIA and IHS had very limited knowledge as to the implementation of the Buy Indian Act at the regional offices. In these two organizations, most of the contracting is done in the regional offices. Even the officers at both agencies had very little knowledge on how to challenge self-certification of Indian-owned companies. Neither agency collect data from the regional offices on the use of the Buy Indian Act. This was in this published survey in 2015 by the GAO. Well, IHS published the rules in December of 2020. It took them 110 years. They've not formally adopted them yet, as far as I know, but I'm going on the premise that the rules are out there and they're going to get it done. So again, in the history, Senate Bill 212, Indian Community Economic Enhancement Act of 2020 of December, updated the Buy Indian Act and a lot more. So hundreds or so years, but it's yet to be opened or staffed or anything. The last time this legislation was passed in 2000, it took 5 years before Commerce opened that office. I know there's a lot of discussion right now about the Treasury having a tribal office, but the Department of Commerce also has the legislation to do that. Next, please. Now, what is the Buy Indian Act? The Buy Indian Act of 1910 allows BIA's Interior, Department of Health and Human Services, to award federal contracts to Indian-owned business without using the standard competitive process, just like the veterans. Among other requirements, the eligible firm must be 51% Indian-owned and give preference to Indians in employment, training, and subcontracting. The language was really clear. So far as may be practicable, Indian labor shall be employed in purchases of the products of Indian industry may be made in open market in the discretion of the Secretary of the Interior. Where there are several key words here: shall, not may or maybe, or if I feel like it. Discretion. It took 28, now our 29 secretaries of Interior to decide what that word meant, the discretion. Practicable. The rule of two determined by a product or service that will be competitive in terms of market price, product quality, and delivery capacity. There, in Oklahoma, we had a company called Cherokee Data, and they managed to get an authorization to sell Apple products. And those are very hard to get. Well, as time went by, Nova, a Navajo-owned company, also got that authorization. And Pam was very upset. But I explained to her that the rule of two was now in place. And that was wonderful because Nova would get a contract, and then she would get a contract, and they would get a contract. So you have to have two, you have to have the competition. Although there are some ways to get around that. Next, please. Question number 2, am I eligible to use the act to grow my business? It's divided into 2 groups. The first group is the IEE eligibility requirements. It's called the Indian Economic Enterprise. And by the way, they call the acronym for the new office is ICE. Who thought of that? I don't know. So any business activity owned by one or more Indians, federally recognized Indian tribes, or ANCs that provide that they have 51% ownership, they are to receive 51% of the earnings from that contract. So don't think that you can just make a deal with someone and just sign off on it. No, you have to receive 51% of the proceeds from that contract. And the management and daily business operations of an enterprise are controlled by one or more individuals who are Indian. that possess the management or technical capacities related directly to the primary industry. Now, question about this. What about if a tribe purchases a business? They don't normally, maybe it's a tire shop and they don't know how to do the tires. So they hire a non-Indian that usually if you buy a business, you get some training with it. So it's a little bit iffy. And I think that is one of the areas that needs to be addressed about the idea that you have to have an Indian owner or managing it, just as an aside. And group 2 is ISBEs. Those are ISBs, Indian Small Business Economic Enterprise. And the majority of the contracts that are going out now at IHS are not quite so much, but for the BIA, they use a lot of this category, the ISBs. And eligibility requirements for ISBs under proposal size standards are the same as for IEEs, but the concern must be small, following the Small Business Administration size standards. Next. Question number 3. Oh, wait. Additional requirements. You have to require them to satisfy that you are eligible at the time the offer was made, the time of the award, and during the life of the contract. If a contractor loses their IEE eligibility during any of those times, the government may terminate the contract for default. So I guess unless they drain the blood out of your body, you're no longer an Indian. But watch, finally, an IEE must meet applicable limitations on subcontracting requirements that are set forth in the federal acquisition regulations. That's another conflict because you can only do so much, but for construction companies, there's much less. So there's some conflict within that one. But a major plus is that there's no timeline. You never expire your eligibility like other set-asides. And there's no dollar limits on the procurement. So don't lose your tribal status. And you do not have to have permission from your tribe as an individual business owner, just your tribal enrollment card. That's the fox in the hen house syndrome that I've run into. One of my first meetings I went to on the Bi-Indian regulations, the councilwoman says to the government, why are you letting all these foxes in our hen house? And this is not just the tribal businesses. Any Indian business is eligible. You don't have to work with the tribe. You can have your own business. And this is a really easy way. If getting into federal contracts is easy to get started in federal contracting. Next, please. Now, let's get down to this part. How does the government determine to make a set-aside under this act? The regulations lay out the procedures for how set-asides under the act should be made. Specifically, both agencies will give priority to the ISBs for all purchases by utilizing the ISB set-aside to the maximum extent possible. Now, if after market research is conducted, they didn't find you in your ProNet, you didn't pop up when they searched for you, they will go to 2 or more IEEs. If they don't find you in the small business database, that ProNet database, they will go to the general database found on sam.gov. So if they can't find you, you've not done your paperwork, you're not up to date, if no such expectation exists, then normally the agency will make a formal deviation determination before they make the award to a non-IEE. Now, pay attention. If such expectations exist, then normally the agency will make a formal deviation determination to make this award to a non-IEE. Next. Deviations from the Bi-Indian Act. Except for purchase card transactions, any request for a deviation from the requirement that purchaser, even to pay for construction for IEE, must be submitted. Get this out of the way. must be submitted for approval to an authorizing official on a memorandum form and documented in the contract file. An authorizing official is not required to approve deviations involving purchase card transactions. However, even these transactions, the documentation must be provided that identifies a rationale for deviating from the buy Indian policy. Now that's for any of the small credit cards, whatever. They have to document that they couldn't find a reasonable company, Indian-owned company, and so therefore they had to deviate. What must a purchaser prove in order to obtain approval to deviate? The purchaser must conduct market research, which shows that he or she cannot reasonably expect to obtain offers from his IEEs that will be competitive in terms of price, quality, and delivery. Pay attention to that part. Can a purchaser deviate? Yes, if the vendor's price has to be reasonable and fair market. These folks know what they expect to pay. And if you're outside that range too much, there's no 10% or anything like that. It's their decision on whether the vendor's price must be reasonable and fair market. Next, please. If no such exception exists, then normally the agency will make a formal deviation determination to make an award to a non-ISB. Here is a link that shows you the staff of both the IHS acquisition folks and the staff of the BIA. Now, how do they get this deviation? If it exceeds the micro purchase threshold up to $25,000, the contracting officer can sign off on it. However, between $25,000 but not exceeding $700,000, the chief contracting officer or the IHS Division of Acquisition Policy, absent a CEO, they have to get this document. It's a form, a simple little form that says that they couldn't find an Indian or the price was too high or whatever. If it exceeds $700,000 but not 13.5 million, the IHS competition advocate. There's a competition advocate in the staff of the division. Exceeding 13.5 million, but not exceeding 68 million, head of contracting activity has to sign off on that deviation document. Exceeding 68 million, HHS Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, the Office of General Counsel, and HHS Department Competition Advocate, and HHE Senior Procurement Executive has to sign off that it's okay. You can find an Indian, then it's all right. Next, please. We're going to do a little case study. And I'm going to tell you a procurement that was not by Indian. It came to my attention well after the fact. The company, a healthcare company, lost to a non-Indian veteran company. The job was $400,000. He lost by $1,500. He filed a FOIA asking for the deviation document from the contracting officer's decision not to go by Indian. This was here in the local area, Pawnee. He filed the FOIA. This was the answer that he got back. This purchase order was not made through an Indian-owned business as prescribed by the Indian Act for the following reason. The Pawnee Indian Health Center has a requirement under equipment for mammography system. The contract specialist completed and processed this procurement as a small business set aside. The award was based on the lowest price technically acceptable and was awarded to the lowest bidder. As an equipment purchase, the contract specialist is not aware of 2 or more Indian-owned businesses that would bid on the solicitation. The call to open it up to small business was set aside, would give the government the opportunity for more bids, which is an advantage to the government. So let's pause here just a moment. What's the problem with this determination? Got a dialogue box, and go ahead, tell me what you think was wrong here.
Yes, so for those participants, please use the question and answer dialog box to answer the question for this case study. What is the problem with this determination? Again, please use the Q&A dialog box.
Okay, well, let's go to the next one. I'll tell you the answers already. Where did she look for companies? No documentation was provided. Did she go out on FedBiz Ops? Did she check this SBA's ProNet? I have a feeling there were a lot of health-oriented companies, I know, which are Indian businesses. She knew it as well. When she didn't find two ISBs, she should have then gone out to engage two of the IEEs. Here's the key though, since the procurement was more than $25,000, she didn't have the authority to make that deviation. She should have gotten a contracting officer or other people to sign off on it. And as an aside, LPTA is a strategy that's been all but banned for procurement across the government. Recent legislation states DoD will avoid this. Military departments rarely use this lowest price technically acceptable process for RT and support services. So if we had known before the contract was led, there's some steps because they are required had we challenged it right away, which is what I've now done on another one. Next, please. I recently,
Skills, I'm sorry for interrupting you. We did
Yes.
have a couple of individuals chime in. Mr.
Okay.
Clinton Stewart said that no market research appears to be provided to IRT, which was not aware of any tribal business. And then Mr. Brent Watts mentioned there was an award in her region for the same item 3 weeks before she turned in the report. So those were some of the answers to that question.
thank you.
So we thank you, Clinton and Brett.
So I ran across just recently in the set aside alert. Before one more.
Good right here.
And this just happened this last week. And this was this procurement that was posted. And it went on, you can read it there. Indian Health Service, the SNACE code, and it was sent out. And I said, why did this not go by Indian? The response I got was, next. Or maybe it's not on there.
Yeah, there it is.
This is just a sources sought notice. Hope this answers your question. And I replied, no, I believe it should be limited to by Indian as a sources sought. I immediately sent off a FOIA to the officer in DC and I requested the deviation documents to include all research that was done to justify this procurement. I just did get an answer back from DC saying that the document doesn't exist yet. So he hasn't done the deviation. So I believe this is one of those points where, oh my goodness, he goes out, puts something on FedBiz Ops, gets one or maybe no responses from Indian-owned businesses, and he goes, oh, well, I couldn't find them. That's why your ProNet is so important, because when he finishes this, if it doesn't go Indian, I will then request the documentation. And that's important because if he goes into a ProNet, he will find the companies. We know that. So this is where you have to start. As soon as you see a procurement out there that is not listed for by Indian, challenge it, or let me challenge it. I don't care. But get somebody, Russell, you could just write a simple statement. So let's talk about FOIAs. Next, please. It's Freedom of Information Act. Who can file it? Anyone. You don't have to give a reason. Just you say other, I want it. How much does it cost? A postage stamp or email. If the file is very large, they may charge a fee for copies, but they not normally. Where do you file it? Every agency has an assigned FOIA officer. Ask for all the deviation documents for the procurement that did not go by Indian, including any market research that was used to justify this deviation. Here is the list, the links to the Department of Interior, an IHS, and then there's a general one for you for all agencies. This is a really good tool because I suspect that contracting officer knows that if he does not go for Buy Indian, there will be a FOIA and he'll have to explain to a lot of people why he didn't go Buy Indian. And that's where we can start finding some accountability. All right, last question or fourth question. That public law that I mentioned that was signed in by President Trump on December 30th, 2020, made several revisions related to economic development for Native American companies. The bill reestablished duties for that Office of Native American Business Development, including advising the Department of Commerce regarding the relationship between the United States and Indian tribes. And I think that just recently they're maybe figuring that one out. Serving as a point of contact for tribes, tribal organizations, and members of tribes regarding economic development and doing business in Indian land. I really feel that the tribes are on an ascendancy now. They have made some major progress. This is one of the tools that will be used. It also requires, the law says that this department will require coordination between Commerce, Interior, Treasury to support economic development in Native American communities. Under that bill, assistance from the CDFI institutions for tribes does not require matching funds. Very cool. Plus, the government, in this law, it says that within this first 18 months, the Government Accountability Office must conduct a study to assess, number one, current programs and services that assist Native American communities with business and economic development. Number two, assistance provided to Native Americans with loans and bonds and tax incentive programs. And number three, alternative incentives for tribal governments to invest in Native American community development investment funds or banks. Now let's hope it's, this is the same office that did the report in 2015. Let's hope it's a lot more positive than that one was. And what else did that new legislation do? It strengthened the Buy Indian Act by incorporating it into this law, bringing it from 1910 to 2020, requiring the Department of Health and Human Services to use Native American labor and purchase Native American industry products unless the Interior or HHS determines it would be impracticable or unreasonable to do so. We've got to strike those words. We have to. In fact, any federal agency that has trust responsibility, all they have to do is ask the Secretary of Interior for permission to use the Buy Indian Act. USDA, ask Interior. Department of Defense, ask Interior. If you have trust responsibilities for tribes, ask the Secretary of Interior to give you the permission to use the Buy Indian Act. It's that simple. Another requirement that was in that law says that HHS and Interior must conduct research to Indian industrial entities in the implementation of enterprise development. I know there's a lot of lists out there. Commerce has lists, different organizations have lists, but we've got to get that coordinated and in a searchable database. But frankly, the ProNet is already there. So then that bill authorized the ANA, Administration for Native Americans, which is an agency that kind of took over the economic development for tribes. And it's in HHS. I don't know why. To provide financial assistance to Native American communities, development, financial institution, they must give priority for financial assistance to applicants who are tribes are looking to develop their tribal codes and court systems, business structures, the community development financial institutions, or to do tribal master plans for community and economic development infrastructure. They must give priority in that one. This is in that law. Next. Oh, wait, there's more. most exciting is the fact this new law is not restricted to just BIA and IHS. They've clarified that fact that other agencies do have used this authority and may continue to do so. Is it possible to expand this act to any federal agency with trust authority? Yes, I think, why not? And number 6, what are the outreach requirements set in this new law? First of all, the regional offices the data from the regional offices must be collected and reported. That each agency conduct procurement management reviews. Hopefully they tie the performance reviews to this requirement for each supervisor individual employee, and that'll have some accountability. That each agency conduct tribal consultation with tribes, Indian industrial agencies, and stakeholders regarding the compliance and other small business goals. This law also said that the HHS and Interior Secretary must also report this information along with a number of other factors annually to Congress. Now, full circle back. Congress wrote the law and authorized the Office of Native American Business. But did they appropriate any money? Or is it going to become an orphan again? That's what we'll see. We will see. I know they have one applicant because that's me, but they have not established the office yet. And I just want to make sure it doesn't become an orphan. Now, due to our limited time today, I'm sending out part 2 to each registered attendee. You'll want to review these documents that capture the data from betasam.gov. First of all, understand garbage in, garbage out. The data is input by humans. Humans that didn't fill out the information. Humans that left out things. So it's important to know that every single procurement is entered into the system. In fact, you can't get paid until the contracting officer or someone over in the corner puts your documentation into that system of the procurement system. Only the DoD is allowed 90 days to enter information. Other agencies have much shorter time to enter each and every procurement. This is the year just ended in September, so October, November, by December, by the end of December, we'll have the information for 21. As regards to the categories for tracking by Indian, it must be filled out under, can be filled out under 3 different categories: the by Indian, IEE, or ISB. And there is also, it doesn't capture the 8A businesses that are with Indian countries. So there's some changes that really need to be made to the system, and to complicate further, simplified acquisitions are not noted as to the source. One major challenge is to modify that reporting system at the Office of Native American Development to capture all the procurements, or to simply use by Indian as the go-to procurement method. These agencies can set their goals more realistically. Again, by Indian should supersede any other procurement. GSA schedules, multiple award schedules. And we know this to be true because US Supreme Court upheld this in the veterans program, Vets First. They were trying to do a runaround going to GSA schedules, and they said, no, Kingdomware versus the VA. The VA lost on that. And I'm sure that the Indians could do the same, just like that. So I'm going to quickly review some highlights of the data, and you'll get to review them at your leisure. Let's get started. Number 2, the numbers speak. And again, first things in, garbage out. Next. Other agencies that have used the Buy Indian Act: Bureau of Land Management, Geological Survey, Office of Policy Management and Budget, National Park Service, Bureau of Reclamation, Centers for Disease Control, Program Support Center, Health Resources Services Administration, National Institutes of Health. They have used the Buy Indian Act in the past, and they are eligible to use it again. And we want to make sure that any of the regulations, any federal agency having trust responsibility should be able to use this act. Next. Here's a summary of By Indian, at the top left. Go back. All right, here we go. The Indian small business for 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 by agencies. Underneath that's the IEEs. Then over here, it's when someone just put in the by Indian. Now, all these agencies over all these years, that's the final bottom line, $526 million plus. Go next. So for year FY20, the recent year, BIA and BIE, the Indian Economic Enterprise, again, ISBs and the buy Indian. This is how they captured theirs. Their total buy was $1,709,750,000. This number divided into that is 56% of their procurements went out under Buy Indian Act. That's not bad, and a lot of room for improvement though. And you'll see that how they sorted it. Sole source, they did very little 8A, competed. Buy Indian, the hub zones, and these are the categories of what they did buy. Next. HHS from 16 to 20. From 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. These are the agencies that bought. And the sum of all of it, what all the money that they spent, all the agencies, 306 million. Next. But for FY20, 10%, the total they spent was $601 million, all by areas. And who used the Buy Indian Act? It's 10% of all the money that the Indian Health Service spent. 10% of it went to the Indians. Maybe they did some 8A, I don't know, whatever, but 10% of that huge number for 20. I'll be interested to see what 21 looks like. Go ahead. These on the left side, IHS's top 40 NESIS descriptions. Here they are. This is the total. BIA, BIE. This was their top 40 purchases by NACE code. Do you sell any of those things? When you get a chance to check it out. Next, please. All right, what type of set-asides did they use? Well, first of all, the big arrows show you that no set-aside was used, or nobody put in the information, or whatever. They can't seem to get those fields filled out. And you can see they're pretty substantial, whether it's large business or, let's see. This is for 20. This is how they use their set-asides. Small business set aside, Indian small business enterprises 14%, 8A sole source 6%, and then over here on IHS, no set aside used, Buy Indian. You get these later, you could go over them. Let's go to the next slide, please. Where do they buy? BIA buys most of their stuff from central office, it looks like. Who spends the money? IHS. Looks like Oklahoma City is the winner there. These are the regions, the regional offices and the regions that you can see, but most of the BIA spends their money central. And the Oklahoma City area spends the most. So where do you want to market to? You got to follow the money. Next. Who do they buy from? These are the people that you need to be talking to. These are Indian-owned companies from top to bottom. IHS on the left, BIA, BIE on the right. These are the companies that are now currently in the database. I suspect there's a few healthcare companies there. These are the numbers, the totals for 20 that they spent with those companies.
And I'm
This is
very,
all
very happy to announce, Ms. Bill, that we have about 7 of our clients at the Four Winds Diversified project on this list. So
Right.
get more of you on this list and
Yes,
or to
yes.
subcontract and partner.
Yes, and that's the beauty of this. The DUNS number, I guess I didn't put them on for BIA, but the DUNS number is there. Oh, I did. I got BIA, and then I just had them in different orders. So you can just click on their DUNS number. You'll find all their contact information, because these folks, I believe, are up to date in their ProNet. Next, please. How do you find out? How did I know this? It's all public information. You can do your research, or you can pay an arm and a leg to have other people do it. But everything that they buy and the names of the vendors they buy from are in this database. Don't pay for these are the free services spending. SBA has training videos. This DSBS is the ProNet. Agencies, there's a link there for their forecast, and beta.sam. YouTube and agency websites. You just have to focus in on what their numbers are. Next. Call to action. Now, in order for the Biennial Act to be a driving force for economic development, to sustain our Native American communities, we all have to participate in rulemaking. It all starts small and grows fast. When you identify procurement that does not go by Indian, send a FOIA. Check the internet for the address. I put them all here as well. CC your congressional delegation, NCAI, NACA, or anyone else who might be tracking this information. And me, I'll track it too. Be proactive. Contact that contracting officer and ask why it didn't go by Indian. They can change it back if they put it, even after it's been put out for procurement. They can change it back if it comes to their attention that there were 2 Indians companies. You have to hold them accountable. And you to join your chamber, be active, sponsor your chambers, set up a lobbying effort, volunteer, plan a day on the Hill, letters count big time to the congressional people. And join with other organizations to monitor the implementation of the Biennial Act. We all have to work on this. I can't be the only one that's sending in FOIAs. And I can guarantee you that that contracting officer knows that I will. If he doesn't, he's going to have to justify to me why he didn't go by Indian. And he tells me I couldn't find one. I'm not going to accept that. Next. The bottom line, as far as I can see, until every employee at the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Indian Health Service, from the time you walk in the door to the very highest level, has a written performance goal to advance and report on the Biennial Act. I don't know if you folks know this, but federal people get a bonus, a cash bonus at a certain level for meeting the procurement goals or their performance goal. And if it's written into a performance goal of an employee that you will report on or have what you did to advance or report on the Biennial Act, oh my goodness, and it takes points off, they don't get as much cash. If every federal officer with trust responsibility is held responsible for the success of the Biennial Act, and the leadership of every tribe and Alaska Native Corporation buys into the value of using and supporting Indian-owned businesses and other businesses owned by tribes. I know that's a hard one, but all of you in your tribal organizations, you must please start by Indian. Here in our tribe, we have it, but it doesn't really mean much because no one really monitors it very well. And that's something that needs to be held responsible. It's almost election time for our councils. the biennial. People ask me why the 638s don't use that. Well, the government has said that that's self-determination. They have to determine to do it themselves, and they won't put that clause. They put a lot of clauses in those 638s, but they do not put the Buy Indian Act as a clause. I think they should. But until this happens, we're only going to see incremental gains. And the final question, do we have another 100 years to waste? I don't think so. Every agency has a mission. With this data, you can find out what their mission is. Go where they go, attend industry days, get on the Zoom. Those. I have a person said she did, I don't know, $100 million. And she said she was on Zoom from morning to night. Find ethical partners. Please check the references for your partner up. We have in this community, we have a lot of people that have gone into federal contracting. They go to the tribe, they knock on the door and say, I'm really good and I can do this for you, and they can't. So you've got to check references. We have to, and get someone with a real track record and understand ethical and contractual requirements. You take classes. The Native American Contractors Association, National Contract Management Association. Here are some more references, a primer on Buy Indian Act, the DOI's Small Business Program, Buy Indian Act. Those are all, the blues are all references for you folks. Next. Well, I guess I'm going to say thank you for your attention today. As always, it's a pleasure to see Native-owned businesses at the table. There's my email and my phone number. And I'm so appreciative to be able to talk to you about the Buy Indian Act. Back to you, Russell.
Excellent, Ms. Bills. Excellent, Ms. Bills. We appreciate you very much. I would like to now open the floor to questions. Please use the question and answer dialog box on your Zoom platform. I do have some questions right now. Ms. Shanna Barehand, where can you find out about BIA or IHS Buy Indian Act opportunities? And I believe that we did put a lot of great information on the part 2 of our presentation. Any other information, Ms. Bills?
Well, Shana, it's, again, go back to those links that I left in there for the procurement forecast. Every agency is supposed to put out a forecast. They don't always do it, but certainly I get one every 3 months or so from the Corps of Engineers with a lot of detail in there, and they will say which ones are going to go to small business. Corps of Engineers, they could use the Buy Indian Act on some things, but that's not exactly what they do. So that you just have to get, again, the forecast and the FedBizOps, Federal Business Opportunity.
Excellent. Mr. Clinton and Brent, these were questions that, or answers, I should say, that were used, so we're done with those. Okay, we got another question. Even though contracts are awarded to Indian-owned companies, how do you determine dollars spent on non-Indian subcontractors? Is there accountability for the 51% subcontracting being Indian-owned?
The subcontract will be part of the documentation that you'll be putting into the government. You're talking about how do they determine it?
Yes, it says
you'll be reporting it.
Dollars spent on non-Indian subcontractors.
Well, you can have a non-Indian subcontractor, but there's limits on how much you can have subcontract to them.
Okay.
So I'm afraid I haven't looked closely at, that's kind of some of the things they need to put in place for this reporting system.
Excellent. I hope we answered that question. It was anonymous attendee, so I hope we did answer your question. Sarah Crazy Thunder is next. Performance goal for Buy Indian Act. Who should we contact or lobby, as it will not happen unless it's at the secretary level? Performance goals
Well,
for Buy Indian Act.
we have some very good senators. In fact, depends on what state you're in. It doesn't do me any good here in Oklahoma, but I think for some states that have very good senators, I think that's part of the effort to just, there's so many things on their plate right now that it's hard to catch their attention, but letters.
Excellent. Excellent. Hope we answer your question, Sarah.
I don't think so. I'm
From
sorry.
Linda Andre. Sorry if I missed, but what is 638?
That is the law where they contract Indian Health Service as part of self-determination. I can tell you quickly that I attended a hearing years ago with Senator McCain pounding on the desk saying, I don't understand. Why aren't these tribes compacting? The compact says that we've spent $10 million a year on healthcare at Osage. I'll use my tribe for an example. But that's under Indian Health Service. So what they decided was if we just gave the tribe $10 million and had them hire their doctors and hit them provide all the services, wouldn't it be better? Self-determination. And so it's a compact. 638 is the number of it. They use the word compact because it's you don't contract with the nation, you have compacts, and the 638 is part of the Self-Determination Act. And so they decided to give the monies, and the senator was just outraged. How come? We're just giving them the money. Why aren't they taking it? And finally, this one brave woman said, because of the procurement system. If you don't compact, you have Indian Health Service. It's always there, even if the government, but now in government shutdowns, if you're compacted and the government shuts down, you are shut down too. So it's a risk, but it's a hard question for tribes to determine whether they want to take over their own services. They do primarily for health. And so they get their $10 million and they spend it, and the tribe's in charge of it. And, it works out.
Thank you. And then we got Daniel Morris. He said, thank you, Kay. And Rick Grieger also said, great presentation and thank you. We got another question, Patrick O'Berry. In your opinion, when it comes to pricing, what is considered reasonable and fair market?
That's a little secret that they have. They bought the product before, and so they'll say, well, it's going to be a range of products in here, and so that's their internal secret. Only a contracting officer has that information, and it's hard to challenge. But you just give your best price.
Thank you. Okay, we got another question. Paul Michaels. Hello, Ms. Bills. I specialize in national security contracts. Are you seeing Buy Indian Act used with the intel community and with other national security agencies and departments?
Not yet, but I think you have to build a case of trust responsibility, and that probably doesn't fall into it, although it probably should. I don't know if they start getting into some of these militias and other things that are coming up, maybe it will, but no, not at this time. But we do have the tribal Justice Department isn't mentioned here, and that would be a good one to target and say, buy Indian.
Definitely.
In fact, as far as that goes, FBI has law enforcement agencies. They could be using the Buy Indian Act. All they have to do is ask permission.
Most definitely. And we do have, I believe, a final question from Mr. Brian Hudson. What department of IHS is responsible for buying dental and oral care products?
Well, that would be the Indian Health Service.
Yeah, what department within IHS? Or is it IHS as a whole.
as IHS as a whole. The way that it happens, a customer needs dental work or dental materials. They go to the contracting officer and they put in a procurement request. And the contracting officer takes that request and says, well, in some agencies, they could be going, anywhere. But under the Buy Indian Act, they shall go first to sort and find the Indian business. And the contracting officer has 100 of these on her desk, and they want to really go through them. But the contracting officer would have that procurement. And you have to search it under the NACE codes or the PSC codes.
Excellent, excellent. And I do have questions within the chat. Will the recording be available? And yes, this recording will be available, as well as handouts for the webinar. We got a lot of good mornings and thank yous. Will we get a copy of the slides? Yes, you will have access to the copy of the slides. Let me see what else. Yes, the webinar will be recorded and shared. We got an individual, Paul Michaels. Kay, can you share some of your FOIA letters in Word format?
No, it's in a form that you fill out and you just check the boxes and you make a little statement. And my statement was, I want to see all the documentation for the research on this procurement. And the answer was, well, it hasn't happened yet, which means he hasn't determined yet. It means get on that line and make sure that he understands that there's Indian-owned businesses that can build those facilities. At one point, there was some restrictions on construction, but that's been removed now.
Excellent, excellent. Marvinez, bravo, great presentation. Clinton, thank you, Kay, great information. Mr. Grieger, great presentation. Can we get a copy? Yes, you will have access to the copy. Sarah, thanks you. And Kurt also thanks you. So that ends the session, the question session of our webinar. Again, we would like to thank all of you for your participation. We will have and do have our contact information on the screen, but tomorrow, each of you who participated will receive an email with all of our contact information, to include Ms. Kay Bill's information. Of course, you can reach out to any of us, Ms. Darla Jones, Mr. Peacock, or myself for copies of this presentation. And for those who would like to join us, our Four Winds Diversified project, we would love to sign you up as clients. But again, we thank you all for your participation. Ms. Bills, we thank you for all of your advice and in-depth knowledge on the Buy Indian Act. And we look forward to working with you in the near future once you head up to Washington.
I know about that.
And any support that we can give to you, we will be happy to do so.
We just need to get that office opened. Put someone in there. Hopefully it's not a lawyer, but someone that we could work with.
It's definitely Ms. Jones. Mr. Peacock, did you have any parting words?
Thank you, Ms. Kay Bills. We've heard some horror stories when it comes to the protesting part of the Buy Indian Act. And if you could shed some hope on the small native-owned firms that don't have the capital to go against federal government employers when it comes to those protests, if you could shed some glimmer of hope in that area.
I think the key here is to use those FOIAs. If they don't go Buy Indian, they have to tell us why, and that's accountability. And it's free to do, and it's a tool that we've overlooked. It just kind of popped in my head one day, and I said, well, let's just FOIA that person. And I guarantee you that Ms. Pawnee will not want to try that again, because the departments in DC call those officers and say, hey, what's going on? So just use that tool. I just like to see a snowstorm. But more than anything, before, when you see a procurement that's out there and it doesn't say Buy Indian, it's from those agencies, call the contracting officer, write to the contracting officer. say, why didn't this go by Indian? Let them know that we're out here and that we want to work. And that's the only way it's going to work. And I'm pretty sure that I'll be monitoring the one procurement I told you about. But before procurement is set, so we know now that they have to get a deviation document and they have to share that. It's public information. And
Thank
that's
you
it.
so much.
Yeah.
We appreciate your time.
You bet. All right. Well, bye, Ms. Peacock. Nice to see you again after all this time.
Thank you so much, Kay. We hope you make it to MBDA in DC. We support you.
All right. Thank you. Bye,
Excellent,
guys.
Excellent. Have an excellent day, Mr. Niels, Miss Jennifer Lujan, and Mr. Robert Mills. Also, thank you for your information. Cake Alaska says hello. Again, thank you all for your participation. Have an excellent afternoon, and we shall see you during our next webinar. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Away.
Excellent.
I'm going to leave now, Russell. You've
All
been
right.
good.
Thank you, Kay. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.